And these are live images that we're getting to you right now from the Palam airport. We're all set for the next dignitary to touch down in Delhi. The Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgio Meloni, is expected to disembark from that aircraft in just a few moments from now. The Italian Prime Minister is known, of course, to have very, very close ties also with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And she had just visited India, in fact, in March as well. So second time that she's touching down in the national capital. The Italian Prime Minister is also going to be a part of a pull-aside meeting. Besides the G20 Summit, she is going to be a part of a bilateral. Remember that for every dignitary who comes down, for every one of our guests who lands in the national capital, we've got a union minister out there to welcome them personally. So in the case of the Italian Prime Minister, you have Minister Karandlaje standing by to welcome her on behalf of the entire country to the national capital. Paulami Saha is joining us live with more details on this. The dignitaries are coming in, Paulami. The Italian Prime Minister, her plane has just landed. She's expected to disembark any moment now.
That's right. The leaders, of course, have started arriving for, the meetings that they are going to have over the course of the G20 Summit over the next 2 days of the weekend. We do know that there is a bilateral with the Italian Prime Minister as well. Giorgio Meloni, of course, has arrived in New Delhi, and there is a bilateral with her as well that the Prime Minister will be hosting over the course of the next couple of days. He will be, in fact, meeting with her tomorrow. That will take place amidst, of course, the G20 meetings that are to take place. So there is a bilateral which is specified with Italy as well. This, of course, among the 15 bilaterals that the Prime Minister will be holding with other world leaders. So clearly a lot of significance which is attached, of course, to this visit as well. We will be, of course, hoping that at the end of this, Akshita, there is, of course, a joint communique which everyone, in fact, has consented to. In fact, there is consensus on the same as well. Remember that there are at least a couple of sticking points because of which we've not been able to yet arrive at a document that everyone agrees upon. And those sticking points, of course, include the Russia-Ukraine war and, of course, climate change and climate action. Yeah. Because in terms of the Bali Declaration, there were countries like Saudi Arabia which were opposed to, the wording of that declaration, which in fact said phasing out or phase out of, fossil fuels, which a country like Saudi Arabia opposed to. But now, of course, countries like the US, Brazil, India, want to take that wording a step further in terms of climate action. Again, that has become a sticking point. So we're hoping that we have the cooperation of all, and those bilateral meetings are going to be extremely key to that. One, of course, with the Italian Prime Minister.
I think we're all looking forward to those images of bonhomie between Italy and India. One tends to also look back at those images that I remember from March, Paulami, when the Italian Prime Minister was here, and the friendship between Meloni and Prime Minister Modi was there for all to see. Prime Minister Meloni even referred to Prime Minister Modi as the most loved leader of the world.
That's right. The Prime Minister, of course, has had a very good working relationship with the Prime Minister of, they've had a very good working relationship, and that is exactly what he'll be hoping is taken a step further when, of course, we arrive at that joint declaration as far as, the two countries are concerned, and, of course, the other nations that are part of the G20 are concerned. So that is, of course, what the Prime Minister will be hoping will, in fact, appear as far as that joint communique is concerned.
Very true. As far as Italy is concerned, remember that the G20 Summit was held under the Italian presidency in 2021, and then the pillars of action were considered to be people, planet and prosperity. You look at those themes in 2021, Paulami, still very much relevant today as well for this edition of the G20 Summit, where we've put the focus again on people, the planet, very important as far as the climate change perspective is concerned. But these images now coming in live, you can see everyone set. Karandlaje standing there, Union Minister, to welcome welcome Prime Minister Meloni on behalf of the country. All arrangements have been made. The red carpet has literally been rolled out there at the Palam airport as everyone's standing by to formally welcome the Italian Prime Minister. Dignitaries are present there, diplomats along with Union Minister Karandlaje. The Prime Minister also gave a brief to all of his ministers just 2 days back, telling them to read up on the G20 Summit, telling them to read up on the dignitaries that they will be welcoming and to keep everyone's head held high. Make India proud is the message that the Prime Minister sent across to all of these ministers who've been deployed very strategically, essentially, to kind of welcome and greet these heads of state as they touch down in India, as they touch down in the national capital. Palam, the Prime Minister, of course, has been personally monitoring all of the preparations. He's the one who told all of his ministers that you will be there at the Palam airport to welcome each dignitary. Okay, live images coming in right now of the entire team stepping out right now before Italian Prime Minister Meloni steps in. You've got an entire list of diplomats, of course, guests who've come from each country accompanying the Prime Minister, accompanying their respective heads of state. And there you have the formal introductions being done of all the diplomats as they touch down, being welcomed by the Indian emissary there, being welcomed by Union Minister Karandlaje. We've been seeing these images coming in from the last many days, actually, but today has been a particularly busy day as most of your heads of states are expected to touch down at the Palam airport today. Now you've got the Italian Prime Minister who's landed now. Any moment now we're expecting those images of her coming out of her aircraft. All the dignitaries who accompanied her, the entire grouping is now stepping out of the aircraft to a formal welcome there by Union Minister Karandlaje. Many ministers who are out there right now, and in those pictures on your screens you can see that there were other dignitaries also who arrived earlier today to a grand welcome. US President Joe Biden is currently on his way. He's expected to reach at about 6:55 this evening. The afternoon at about 1:40 is when UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak will also touch down in Delhi. Today alone you can expect at least 10 of, in fact, the G20 countries to be touching down in the national capital. Let's continue getting you all those live images right now from the Palam airport. We're keeping our cameras focused on that plane, on the boarding gate there, because from there is where you're going to be seeing the Prime Minister also stepping out. It's been a traditional welcome that we've been trying to give for each dignitary who touches down right now in the national capital. Besides a Union Minister being deployed, there's a lot of song and dance involved in the grand welcomes being accorded to these world leaders, because India, the government, has put that focus on culture and tradition, saying every step of the way we must make them feel deeply rooted in our beliefs. We must make them deeply rooted in the Indian experience. And that's exactly been the focus ever since every dignitary has touched down essentially on Indian soil.